Hello, welcome back to the Goodness Margin, the place where we find margin for the good things in life. A question I get from you so often in so many ways is, how do I get my spouse on board when I want to minimize? So today we're talking about marriage and minimalism. And I have with me licensed therapists Adam and Karissa King. They have a wonderful podcast, Dear Young Married Couple, where they share all of this information with you. So this is part of our conversation.
That sort of leads into, what if you have a lot of collections? Like there's a lot of things that are special.
Yeah.
Those questions would help someone to see, okay, maybe this one particular collection is important. And as a spouse, we do have to respect our spouse and know that we both live here and we both have things that are special to us. But you probably heard the quote, if everything is special, nothing is special.
Yeah.
So in some way,
totally.
Maybe that's the whole figuring out the yes and the no land is, okay, you can't have like 20 collections.
Yes.
Totally. Right. That would kind of go back to that area of compromise that I would say, okay, so you have 5 areas of collection that are really important to you. I want to honor that, but our house is 2,000 square feet.
Yeah.
And you want to have shelves full of all your stuff all over the house. While I like your stuff, I think it's very valuable. I think that it would maybe make me feel more peaceful to have less of this stuff in these rooms. What would it be like maybe to only have 1 or 2 of your collections out?
Yeah.
You know, what would those be? And just sit back for the answer. Or you could say, you know, could we possibly, you know, I'm not saying let's get rid of all of this stuff. How about, could we put them in some bins, some heavy duty bins, so none of it gets damaged? And maybe we keep out 2 of these things for viewing, you know? And later you could come back to it and say, you know, we have these bins that you have never went back to. Can we sell these things on eBay and make some money for our next vacation? But remember, it's step, right? It's so like, if here's a concept. We work with lots of couples, like they know that their relationship's at a 3 and they want a 10. They want connection, they want intimacy, they want adventure, they want all these wonderful things, but they know that they're at a 3. They're in a rough spot, right? Our desire is to be 10, but we know, and you know, that we have the gap of frustration, but you know, it's probably going to be futile to aim for an 8 or a 9 right now. Let's just try, what's the next step? That's a 4 or a 3.5. Let's get to 3.5 or 4. So what would 3.5 or 4 look like in your, if you're trying to get to minimalist everything at 10 and you're really at a cluttered 3, what is the very next thing that you can do to solve for? Like, get 1 collection out of the living room so that you can have 1 area of peace.
Yeah. And I think that we can forget sometimes that we work our way through these things. I mean, I even tell people it was well over a year, almost 2 years into my journey before I really hit my sentimental things hard. I had to work my way into it. And I just did my laundry room 2 weeks ago. And there were a few things that were some craft things that used to be more of what I did. But I'm like, you know what? This is like, I haven't used these in the last 6 months. Like, I'm finally ready to let them go. So maybe I've worked my way through these things and I've been doing this for a while. And now I just want my spouse to come on board and be like, boom, be with me at 10. I'm here. I've worked my way through. And they're like, hold on.
Yeah.
And even those sentimental things, I recommend that people wait a while.
Yeah.
Like you said, let's start with the towels or the linens.
Yep.
But talking with the collections, a lot of people, if people use the word hoarder, and I think it's probably loosely used.
Yeah.
Because most people probably are not like, I don't know, is that
really hoarding?
Is that a clinical term or something? But
Mm-hmm.
lots of times it's because of some sort of trauma that's happened in their life.
Oh,
so
yeah,
you can just walk in and be like, hey, let's get rid of all of these things.
Mm-hmm.
But many times this was the way I was raised. Like, my family is like this.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
My sister and I talked, my mom was probably a minimalist before the word was a thing. And I'm sure that's greatly affected me. So
Totally.
what happens if I was raised with a lot of stuff and stuff was important? So how do you begin to address that?
Yes.
Well, he's just like his dad. He's keeping all the things. And that was in this question here. My husband loves collecting things. It's a family trait. We are being overrun with things. How do you cope with things that you do not find important, but your spouse does, or that you find important, your spouse does not? My husband comes from a hoarding family. How do I help him let go of stuff?
Yes.
I think you sort of began to enter into that family phase. So what happens when someone says, well, I think my spouse is like this because this is how.
Totally. And that comes up frequently, not just with, minimalism and organization, but just our family of origin. We emulate a lot of what we grow up with. And then sometimes we do the opposite of what we grow up with. And so sometimes you might find that somebody, wants to keep everything because they grew up in poverty and they didn't have anything. And so controlling that is making up for the lack of control they had growing up. And so the dream behind the conflict can be a really good tool for getting to the bottom of that. But then what do you do once you guys decide, okay, you have 5 collections, we're going to narrow it down to 2. When you guys both decide that that's what you want to do. Adam used good language earlier that can be helpful. He said, what would that look like for you? How would that feel for you if we narrowed it down to 2 collections instead of 5? And hear them out. Like that could be a big loss for them. And just like when someone passes away and you grieve the loss of that person passing away, you often have to grieve the loss of things that you get rid of. And so how can you make it meaningful? So for instance, perhaps, I'm working with a client right now. Her husband is a shoe hoarder, like a legit shoe hoarder. He has an entire room that's only dedicated to shoes. And so obviously he needs to work through some things and he's not my client. So we're working with her on what can we do, in response. And so one of the things I've recommended is, can you talk with him about what it would look like to preserve the meaning of these shoes? And what if we did a photo shoot where you put on every single pair of shoes and we created a photo album of you in all of these shoes?
That's a really good, good
and
job
so
there.
There's different things you could, like, for instance, we used to collect mugs and magnets from everywhere we went. Well, that was overrunning our entire kitchen and our fridge. And we like our fridge to be nice and clean. And so we realized that what can we do to still honor our value of travel?
Everybody wants a souvenir, right?
Right. Yeah. And so we started just doing patches to put on our backpack. And so that takes up way less space. It's still really cool. It honors that value. And it helped us make meaning of the loss. So, okay, we can get rid of the mugs. We can get rid of the magnets because we still have meaning here. And that can be the case for a lot of collections that you get rid of. Get rid of kids, stuff that's just collecting and all their color crayon things that they made for you in Sunday school. And it's precious. And I'm sure you want to keep a couple of those. But how can you make meaning of it while you grieve the loss of, you're going to get rid of maybe a whole box of things and keep some and get rid of the rest? Well, you can take pictures of all of that and put it in a digital album and scan it so that you can look through it as a family. Maybe you make a video out of all of those. And then you can watch that video periodically, probably a lot more often than you would get that bin out and go through it all.
Right.
And so there's different ways that you can make meaning of the loss. And that can be helpful when you're working with family of origin issues. How can we make meaning of this loss?
That's good. And I have an entire video on sentimental things, but one of my rules that I created was, if I can use this now, because I feel like for me, it's not providing any use in the attic unless I know it's something like my wedding shoes. My daughter, she was 3 or 4 when I was going through them. And she's like, Mom, please, I want to wear these one day. And so I'm like, okay, I will keep them. And if she decides not to, then we'll pass them on at that point, whenever that is, hopefully 40 years, but
40 years,
right, probably not. But if I would rather not keep all the things and have meaning for the few things that I can have that are useful, that I can use now. And in my grandmother's crystal
Mhm.
and maybe only have the one thing that's from her.
Yeah.
And I know not everyone's ready to get there yet.
Yeah.
Those are really
Yeah.
great things to talk through. And I love what you said about truly listening to your spouse
Mhm.
rather than trying to have your agenda heard.
Yes.
Get
Exactly.
These are
Yes.
great questions. So will we be able to link a PDF of this paper?
Sure.
Yeah.
below?
Yeah. Yep.
That would be awesome. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It has the sample questions for the dream catcher. And then what we didn't go over, and you can see in the PDF that's linked, are the sample dreams for the dreamer to share about. And they're just, I won't go through all of them, but things like having a sense of power or control, exploring a different side of myself, being able to rest and just be, ending a chapter of my life, each of these dreams that you might want to share about.
Yeah. And I think this is so great because I can see how this would really benefit any marriage, really just getting on the same team, on the same page as things. I know that my son recently, I guess he had asked me something, and then he asked his dad, hoping he'd have a different answer. And we conferred and had the same answer. And he's like, why are y'all on the same team all the time? And I was like, yeah, it's like a
Yes.
as a parent, right? Like, I'm so proud of that.
That's
and maybe we
great.
don't always agree on exactly what we should say to the teen, but we do. And when you're on the same team, it just makes all the difference.
Yes.
And so coming together on the same team, what do you want to see in your house, and making that compromise? These are all really, really great points. And I think it's really going to help people.
Aw.
Thank you for joining us today in this conversation. This is just one part of this conversation. And if you have not got to see the rest of these videos, you can find those links in the comments below. If you've enjoyed this video, I would encourage you to subscribe to my channel, click the bell so you can be notified when the next video goes live.